Hi, I want us to look at regression today in statistic. Regression. The first thing you should know is we are talking about regression, which is opposite of progression. So what does it mean for something to regress? What we are simply saying is tracing back to the original point. To regress means to trace back. You are at this position, you want to trace back, you want to reverse back. Okay? Let me give you an instance. Assume you are surprised that the people of China, they are successful. This is China. You believe they are successful. That means they are rich. You take another country, for instance, in Africa. Say another country in Africa like Ghana. Say they are poor, for instance. Say it's a poor country compared with China. Now you have interest to investigate why these people in China are rich. So what you need to do now, you need to trace back the source of the riches. The source of these riches. You need to trace, this is the riches. You want to trace back to the source. That is, this process is what to see what is regressing to, what is influencing these riches, the source of these riches. You also want to know the source of this poverty, the poorness. What is the source? So this process, what we are doing now, you are trying to trace back, do a research to know the genesis or what is influencing the poverty in Ghana and what is influencing the riches in China. I'll give you another scenario. Assume that you have interest. You found that in a particular school, the student in that school, this is school, the student in that school, they spend a lot of time reading. Time in reading. Now you want to know why this is like this. In another school, for instance, you find that you are a lecturer in this other school. Your student, they don't spend much time in reading. So you want to know why the people in this or the student in this school, they read more than the student in this other school. So you are trying to trace it back to the original. So that process of tracing back to the source, what is influencing this reading? What is influencing the riches, the wealth of China? What is influencing the poverty in Ghana? What you are trying to do, you are trying to trace it back with what we call regression. That is, you are regressing back to know the source of the poverty. Now assume that while you were trying to know what is influencing the prosperity of China and also what is influencing the poverty of Ghana and what is influencing the reading time in that particular school, assume in the case of the reading, you found that this particular school, you want to use the age of the student, the age, to determine what the time spent in studying. Okay. Now, if you want to do the relationship now, assume you've called this one now. This one, I want to see how it regress back to this one. Only two you are trying to consider. This one is called what? Linear regression. But in the case of China, assume that you found that the riches of China depends on many things. For instance, wise investment. Okay. That is number one. You also find out what the discipline of the citizen. You also find out what the support of the government. Now, you want to use this theory to predict the riches of China, because what you are trying to use to predict that riches is more than one, is therefore called what? If they are more than one, is therefore called what? Multiple regression. That means all of them regress towards what? The riches. Okay? Because they are multiple, there are many, regressing back at the same time to a particular what? A particular dependent variable. A particular what? Dependent variable. These are predictors you are trying to use to predict this guy. So you know the difference between what now? Linear and what? Multiple regression. Multiple regression is when the predictor is more than one. While linear is just when you are using one predictor to what? To check how it influence what? The dependent variable. You have things you are interested in, your interest, for instance. You are interested in riches of China, the riches here. You're also interested in the poverty in Ghana. You are also interested in what? Time spent in what? Reading. So you want to see, these are a different scenario. This is research of its own. This another research of its own. This is another research of its own. So you want to trace each of them back to what? To the influencer. What is predicting them? The predictor. So this one you are interested in study are called what? The dependent variables. Dependent variables. Why you call them dependent variable is because they are depending on something to exist. I mean, this riches is depending on something, and you want to know that thing that is depending on. The poverty too is depending on something. What is it depending on? The time of reading is depending on something. What is it depending on? Whatever they are depending on are called what? The predictors. Or you call them what? The what? Independent variable. So now, have we said that? How do you represent them? In a framework diagram, to represent dependent variable and independent variable, you simply draw two boxes like this. You call this one that you are trying to trace that is depending on something like riches. Let's call say riches. Depending on something. You don't know what it's depending on now yet. You say this one is what? Dependent variable. What is it depending on? Maybe you found that one of the things you are tracing, you are thinking that this riches depend on in China is the wise what? Wise investment. So this wise investment, it means that the riches of this country depends on their wise investment. So this one is called what? The independent variable, which is what? IV. Or this one is called DV. What regression is coming to do here now is that we want to trace these riches back to what? Wise investment. The same thing, maybe in case of Ghana, you find that this in case of Ghana, you see poverty in Ghana as the dependent variable because it's depending on something. Because Ghana cannot be poor if there is no influencer. So what are those influencers? Those influencers are the independent variable because they are not depending on anything. So we can see that you can say, okay, you can try to say that one of those things is corruption. So corruption is what? Independent variable because it's not depending on anything. So you want to trace this poverty back to the source. This process of trying to trace it back now is called to see regression. How does it depend on this corruption? Okay. And the last one we are tracing now is about the student, the reading of student, time spent in reading. Let's call it time spent in what? In reading. So this is what? Dependent variable. But what is it depending on? Will be here as what? The independent variable. And we found that maybe the age of student. The age of student. So we want to trace put it back. We want to see if it is true that the age of student actually influence what? Time of study. This is the framework representative. This is not enough for our representative. You go out now and make some what? Observation. Observation is a process of researching, taking your data. You are like the age of student now. You are looking at the time they spend in reading. You have a table like this. You say, for instance, you interview about maybe 10 students or 5 students, for instance. Let's say 5 students. And this is age. This is the time they spend in reading. Maybe this guy is 20 years. On the average per day, he spent about 40 hours. Okay? And there's another guy that is 35. Is spending about 10 hours per day. Another guy is just 22, spend about 12 hours per day. There's another person that is 12 years you met. You say for him, he can only read for 13 hours. Then you saw another person, 50 years, can read for just 5 hours per day. So these are your observations you went out to do. So you need to represent them in the form of graph. Okay? In your observation, you have to go and plot the graph now. Say, this is my graph. And you know that this is always what? The x-axis. We call this one what? The y-axis. To represent independent variable, the y-axis capture what? The independent variable. And to represent the dependent variable, you use what? The y-axis is what? The dependent variable. So it means that we are trying to trace the time spent in reading. So this one will be time spent in reading. This one also represents riches as per China. Riches. This one also represents what? Poverty as per what? Ghana. Okay. So this line now is what? Depending on other things like this one, for instance, for this particular one, we are saying what? Age is the independent variable. We also see what the wise investment in case of China, and we also see that poverty to case of corruption. Okay, so this is how to represent them now. So now let's assume that what we are interested in here for now is just what? Age as the independent variable. Why? The time spent in reading, we are trying to predict time spent in reading. Spend in reading. Okay. Now, we want to trace this time spent in reading back to what? The age. That's why we are saying regression. Let's see how time spent in reading regress back to age. How we can trace it backward to age. So to do that now, you start doing your plotting, all your observation you have made. Remember, we have done observation here. This one we have done observation here, or that this place. So you start doing what? Plotting of your what? Plotting of your graph. You come here, you find here there was one line. So you did so many. Maybe you did for about 1,000, for instance. You did for 1,000, for instance. At the end of the day, what you have done for 1,000, for instance, you have done plotting the graph, which you call this one what? Scatter plot. Okay, scatter plot. Now we have different type of what? Scatter diagram. The scatter plot. The first most perfect one you have is one that goes up like this. That is called what? Perfect positive correlation. Perfect positive correlation. That is what we really desire. But when it's coming down like this, after you have plotted your graph, when it's coming down like this, it's called what? Perfect negative correlation. Okay. Now this is okay. This is not what we desire. Okay. But sometimes it happens like this. Okay. We cannot avoid it. The next thing you should see now is that if you have this type of connection, for instance, we say what is low degree of positive correlation. Remember, when it's going up like this, it's positive, right? But what makes it low degree is because the point are what? A little bit was scatter. They scatter. Though they are going positive, but what? They are wide from each other. They very wide from each other. Okay? We say low degree of what? Positive correlation. And because this one is going down, by going down it will make it negative, but though the going down, but the point two are still scattering too far from each other, we say it's low degree of what? Negative correlation. But when the lines pass through this type of densely populated or densely connected point like this, we say what is high degree, because they are very close to each other. This one, when they are very close to themselves now, though it's negative going down, you see high degree of what? Negative correlation. But when you have this like this, it means that what? There's no correlation. This one now, no correlation. You have something like this, no correlation, no correlation, no correlation.